Hello everyone and welcome back to the Spanish Sling, a podcast where we try to bridge the gap between the Spanish and the Singaporean companies and encourage economic relations between them. Are you interested in the fascinating and ever-changing world of the startups and accelerators? Today we welcome in the Spanish Sling José García, Head of Partnerships at IoT Tribe, a deeptech accelerator and technology ecosystem builder, based in Singapore and with offices in Madrid and London. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here, Jose. So in this first part of the interview, we're going to focus on the startup ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the main differences between the startup ecosystem in Singapore and in Spain?
Yeah. Well, overall, I think the government support might be one of the key components. It's true that in Spain, things are getting better, and thanks to the support provided by the European Union, we're seeing more and more initiatives to foster and support the whole startup ecosystem. But probably Singapore is one step ahead in terms of nurturing the ecosystem and making sure that all the right ingredients are there to facilitate the growth of startups. On the other hand, the Singapore market is quite limited because at the end of the day, this is a city of the size of Madrid, right? So when it comes to testing a solution with a sufficient number of potential users, in that case, Spain has a kind of better ecosystem there to make sure that everything works properly in the domestic market before starting to expand overseas and internationally. So yeah, those might be.
So we have advantages, but we have to still catch up a bit.
Exactly, like every ecosystem has the particularities and differences. For example, Spain is a great location also to access the US, to access South America, right? So yeah.
And what are the advantages of setting up a startup here in Singapore?
Yeah, probably, as we mentioned before, right, the government support is one of the key elements there. It's true that there must be like a percentage of local ownership, like at least 30% of local ownership of the startup to be able to access to all the ecosystem and set of supports, grants and initiatives that the government is putting there in place for the startups. But you're able to meet that requisite, it's kind of easy and you have a lot of support. Obviously you also have to deliver, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first year, you have access to all the support, and then after the first year you have to start to deliver results, and especially hiring local people, right?
Yeah.
To keep receiving all that help from the government. Yeah.
And Jose, you have been talking a lot about the government help with the startups. So do they offer any kind of grant or financial benefit?
Yeah, exactly. They have one of probably the better known grant or instrument is the Enterprise Development Grant. Mm-hmm. And through this grant, they usually cover up to 80% of the cost that you might incur, when developing a new solutions, when hiring people, when expanding internationally, whether across the region or to Europe, US. On top of that, you have a lot of programs that help these startups expand internationally, right? For example, IoT Tribe, we were running one that was focusing on taking Singapore startups to the UK through London, and that's a program that is very, very cost effective for the startups. It's basically subsidized, and it allows the startups to, kind of land in those new markets in a very soft way and with a very good connections and network of investors, potential clients, and also like ecosystem players. So
yes, that's very interesting for all the startups who may be listening to be aware of all those grants and help that they can receive.
Mm-hmm.
And what may be interesting or what may be attractive for Singaporean companies and organizations? How can they be attractive to Spanish startups?
Yeah.
What is their appeal?
Yeah, I think that the overall technological level that we have in Spain is quite high. We have been working through our deeptech accelerator with several startups from Spain, all across Europe and pretty much the world, but from Spain. And one of the key components that we're seeing is like the founders are really, really passionate. Most of them, they love what they do. They're willing to, go that extra mile to land the project, to find a way to make it work, to make it happen. So on the one hand you have that passion, and on the other hand you have the technological capability. I mean, they have really good technologies because in Spain we have a very good education system. I think that's a fact. And the general startup scene is also evolving, right? And finally, I think Singaporean startups and across the region, they find it pretty easy to work with Spaniards, right? Spanish people, because probably given the background of our country and our culture and everything, we are pretty used to adapt and kind of we are pretty fluid when working across different cultures, right? And I think this is something that they really like. We are not that like prepotent like some other other might be. So yeah, like local people, they really like that, that ability to blend with the local culture and ecosystems and the curiosity to learn about them, right? Because at the end of the day, that's a key part and component of any business relationship.
That's very interesting. So make sure that you know that we're passionate and flexible, but that we also have the technology to deliver.
Yeah.
And Jose, the last question. How do you envision the future of startups here in Singapore?
That's a very good question. As we said before, right? There's a lot of support from the government, but there is also a lack sometimes of having the sufficient amount of startups reaching like later stages, right? So there are many startups that are being supported by government, receiving public funds, but they it's hard for them to take the leap and scale up and being able to become like a proper company and expand internationally. This is something that we're also supporting the local ecosystem to accomplish. But that's the main challenge. And also speaking to some of our startups, they also find quite difficult to hire people locally, right? There is a lack of resources, and because of that, they have to look at the region, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, trying to find that talent. And currently, it's difficult, right, to hire foreign people in Singapore. And if there is a shortage in-house, then that's a kind of complicated situation that ideally in the years to come will get better as we left behind the pandemic and all this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a point there.
Thank you so much, Jose, for highlighting all these problems that may be solved in the future, we hope. And thank you so much for giving us an overview of the startup ecosystem.
It's a big pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jose.